Fancy School District families and community stakeholders, and welcome to our Parent University session entitled, Why is My Child So Anxious? My name is Kyron Harvell. I'm director of the STAR grant. STAR stands for School Transformation Accelerated Results. We're very fortunate this evening to have CRPIS interventionist from the STAR grant, Mr. Randall Hester. He's going to provide a final presentation for you on our topic. Thank you guys again for being here. Please feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A section, and we will answer questions during the last 10 minutes of the session. So Mr. Hester, thank you, and I will turn over to you this time.
All right. Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Harvell. Appreciate it. I want to get started tonight. As Mr. Harvell stated, my name is Randall Hester. I am a STAR interventionist for the Lansing School District. I've been working with children and families since about 1995. During my life's journey, working with children and families, I've been able to observe children and how they respond when faced with challenges, both in their homes and in their school environment. I've also been able to see recently how children respond to challenges in their social media environment. And so children are often impacted by these factors from their environment and the world around them. And the one factor right now that's causing some anxiousness in our children and in our homes is the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic is no different than some of the other challenges that are faced by our children. When faced with these challenges, we all, not only our children, but adults too, we respond differently. And the way our bodies respond often indicate how well we're able to adapt and adjust to the changes that are occurring, not only in our lives, but in the environment around us. And so in this presentation, we're going to discuss the impact of the pandemic on our children's mental health. We'll also look at what anxiety might look like in your house, in your children, and when they are dealing with challenges. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to go right on in. All right. Hopefully you all can see this.
Yeah, we can see it, Mr. Hester.
All right. And so there we go. And so ask that first question, why is my child anxious? Why are our children anxious? That's a good question. So there are a lot of heavy things happening in our world that cause, students to feel worried and anxious. Things such as the COVID pandemic, being disconnected from peers and their learning environment, feeling isolated from family and friends, learning in a virtual setting, and having family and friends die from COVID are all a few of the things that could lead to our children possibly experiencing anxiousness while being confined in their homes. Isn't that interesting to see now that, once something is taken away, like coming to school, all of a sudden children miss being there. Why? Because they need that social interaction. When that social interaction is taken away from them, it sometimes causes, anxiety, that fear of the unknown. I mean, they don't know when they'll be able to go back and see their friends. They don't know when, a family member might contract COVID-19 and, something happened. And so, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiousness going on right now in our communities and in our world, in our homes. So that's one of the things. Another thing I put on here, if you notice the school buses, and with those school buses, sometimes we don't take into consideration now that our children may be experiencing anxiety because of the simple fact that they are away from us for about 8 or 9 hours in the traditional school setting. We're not with our kids, and they're not with us. And so we have that time apart. And, as the old saying goes, absence makes the heart fonder. And so when we're away from our kids and when they're away from us, they want to be home. They want to, hang out with us and see us, and we want to interact with them. But when we are all combined and all in the house together, sometimes that can be a little frustrating because it disrupts the natural pattern of the way things are going in the home. You know, if you work in the evenings or you're working late night, you may say, you know, man, when my kids go to school, that's my time to get my sleep. That's my time to get my rest. But when you're all at home like we are now during the pandemic, where do you get that rest? Where do you get that sleep? And so we know that if you don't have a lot of sleep, or if your sleep pattern is disrupted, that can cause some frustration, that can cause some agitation, that can cause stress, and most of all, it can cause some anxiety because, you know, now we're wondering, okay, when are our kids going to go back to school? When are we going to be able to return to normal? What's going to look like normal for my family? And so because we don't have the answers to those, it causes that anxiety, it causes that worry, it causes that disruption in the family home. And so some of these are the things that, you know, we might be dealing with right now in our homes. And so right now, hopefully what we can start doing is, if you are dealing with it, please don't pretend that, oh, well, you know, my home is, we're rolling right along. I mean, if you are, great. But in most cases, that's not the case for everybody. A lot of people are dealing with anxiety. A lot of people are dealing with stress. A lot of people are overcome with emotions because, you know, they've lost some of those loved ones. They've lost family members. They've lost friends. They've seen people get sick and not recover. They've seen, you know, a lot of different things happen right now. Jobs are being lost, which is a stressful time. Income is being lost. And so all these different things impact us and can cause or lead to, you know, our children and us feeling anxiety or feeling anxious. And so when it comes to that question, why are we anxious? There's a lot of different things happening in our world and in the environment around us that could cause or lead to that right now. All right, let's go to our next slide. Oops. Gotta go back here. Let me see. Trying to figure out how to get this back. Here we go. Okay. So, what is anxiousness? Anxiousness is defined as a temporary feeling of unease, nervousness, typically about an imminent event, such as COVID-19. Or something with an uncertain outcome, such as when are we going to return to school? The uncertain outcome is usually beyond the control of the individuals worrying about it. Our children are, you know, like I said, mentioned earlier, they're wondering, when are we going to return to school? When are we going to be able to get back in the classrooms? When are we, especially for those students who are seniors, you know, juniors and seniors, there are those seniors in high school, this is their last year. Some of them are wondering, you know, that can be a really stressful time in and of itself without a pandemic. But you throw in the pandemic, all of a sudden, you know, you're wondering about, man, am I going to have a graduation ceremony? Am I going to be able to have an open house? Or am I going to be able to do all these different family functions that are usually the norm with those students who are graduating or seniors in high school? So you have all this uncertainty. When a child or an adult worries constantly about the situation they are experiencing, their anxiousness can turn into anxiety, which is the long-term version of anxiousness. And so anxiety is an emotional state characterized by constant feelings of tension, worried thoughts, physical changes like increased blood pressure, adrenaline rushes, nervousness, sweaty palms, heart palpitations. You know, sometimes when people are having panic attacks and sometimes that heart you start having heart palpitations, which will make it feel like almost like you're having a heart attack. And so got to be careful in those situations. Another thing that, you know, as I was preparing for this and I looked through the statistics of effects of COVID-19 on youth. And there were many studies, there were a lot of studies done. Most of them were done in like China and overseas. They didn't have the results in for like a lot of the ones that were done here. But of those, you know, there was one study done in January of last year around the time that COVID was first coming out, using a mental health screening service, and they reported that anxiety and depression screenings increased slightly in that beginning period, like from January to April, when we really didn't know about, how bad this could actually get. And so once they began to shut down things like school, once they began to shut down things like people's jobs, workplaces, they began to shut down all these different things, even places of worship. Once they began to shut these down, then those screenings began to indicate, a sharp jump from May to June. And they began to report in some of these other countries that the anxiety screenings in June were up like 406% greater than what they were in January and during that January and April time. And so while screenings for depression were 457 times greater, the percentage of people diagnosed as at risk for psychosis spiked in May when the lockdown and self-isolation really began, when they began to really feel the effects of self-isolation. Because everybody initially before was assuming, we'll return back to work in May, or they began to open the economy back up in June, or, we'll have some idea that there'll be a possibility of returning back to school, in the fall, but, we might even, get a little bit of school and summer programming in during the summer. Well, none of that materialized. None of that happened. All because of the simple fact that this thing began to really shut down things. Not only did depression and anxiety spike, but there was also an increase for those considering self-harm, having suicidal ideations. And so this was really important a really important thing to look at, because now they're beginning to report a lot of this happening among our school students. And so it's really important to be able to identify when our students are feeling or showing signs of anxiety or showing signs of being overwhelmed with emotions because of being locked down or in the house, or not being able to leave, or not being able to see their friends, or not being able to go to school. And so this really has caused a really stressful time in our society. One of the key consequences of the pandemic, rather than, with threats of threats of sickness and death, are responsible for stressing people using the screening, that loneliness and isolation. That's also connected to those feelings of self-harm, because when you think about it, people get their self-worth a lot of time from those around them, those in their environment. A lot of kids get their self-worth from their friends, from those in their social circles, on their social media page. And so when those things are cut down sometimes, or when those things are kind of taken away, it's really difficult and hard to maintain. And so then, you're overwhelmed. You have these feelings of overwhelmed. One of the really important factors that I found from these studies is that nearly half of those seeking help self-identified as girls and women between 11 and 25 years of age. And so this study helps to raise awareness about specifically who the harmful effects of COVID-19 really affect. And, those young ladies and those young women, man, we have to take that into consideration. So if you have young daughters or young ladies in your house, or even nieces and sisters, really make sure that you are staying connected to them. Because if they start disconnecting, that should be a sign for alarm right there. For the simple fact that, we know that it's affecting them at a higher rate than it is maybe the young boys or young men, because, these research studies are indicating that. And so we have to make sure that we are being mindful of these things as we continue to navigate through this pandemic. In another study of 8,700 junior and senior high school students using a health questionnaire for generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD as it's also known. The prevalence of depression symptoms was 43.7, and anxiety symptoms was 37.4, and both depression and anxiety were at 31.3. And both of these were higher again in those females, with an increasing grade level from junior to senior high school. Students with depressive and anxiety symptoms have more knowledge. Students without depression or anxiety symptoms were reported to have more knowledge about preventative and controlled measures as compared to those students with depressive and anxiety symptoms. So what is that saying to us? Well, I think that what that sounds like it's saying to me is that we need to make sure that we are educating our students on, some of the measures, some of the preventive and controlled measures when it comes to COVID-19. We need to talk to them about, social distancing. We need to talk to them and remind them about wearing their masks, not under their noses, not trying to look good and cool, not trying to wear it on their heads as hats, or trying to, like I said, trying to be cool or trying to fit in. But they need to make sure that they're taking these preventative and controlled measures serious, because this is a matter of life and death. And it also could be a matter of whether or not they're going to begin to show signs or have developed some of those symptoms or displaying symptoms of anxiety or depression. So we want to make sure that we're enforcing, these preventative measures. Now, when it comes to anxiousness and anxiety, some of the things that you might notice in your child might be some kids, and I've had to do observations of some of the classrooms, and some kids hide in their rooms. They won't even come out. They won't even participate or engage in class because they're dealing with anxiety, but they don't want to talk to anybody about it. So what they do is their course of action is to hide in their rooms. Others may, I went to a lot of classes and noticed that some of them have their cameras turned off during remote learning, and they don't want to engage or participate with anyone. That could also be a sign of anxiousness or anxiety. And so these could all be talking points or subtopics for discussion when you talk with your kids and say, hey, if you ever observe your kids and you see that they're not turning their screen on, or they're not engaging, or they don't want to come out of their bedroom that day, but they can't tell you why, this might be a sign of anxiety or anxiousness. Others may feel panicky and they don't want to go out in public. You might want to say, hey, let's get out and have some fresh air, but no, they don't want to go out into the public. They don't want to because they have an anxiety or a fear about being out in the public because they don't know. I had one student, a young man that I worked with before a while back, and when Ebola was out, and this young man he had some anxieties about that. He already had some social anxieties, but he would hold his breath because he did not want to contract it. He didn't want to catch it. And so one way that he would, one of his preventative measures was to hold his breath when he was out in public. We don't want our kids having to try to do that. We need to make sure that we're noticing if there's changes in their mood or changes in their behaviors, and there's changes in there. And so we're going a little later on, we're going to talk about, some of the different changes that we'll see, that we can possibly see as a result of COVID-19 as it wears on and it affects our children's mental health. They also may complain of having headaches or physical problems just to avoid going to school. And so this is another issue that we might have. And so they may isolate in their rooms away from family or friends. This next one is they may is becoming a serious thing that happens among some of our teens, some of our adolescents, and that is they begin to develop, substance abuse issues such as smoking, vaping, using marijuana as a way to cope with their feelings or anxiousness. Some children struggle with concentrating and focusing because they're so worried about, what's going on and having a fear. Some children may be angry all the time. As a result, they may be anxious and kids, they don't want to show anybody or tell anybody they're scared or they're afraid of something. And so, they won't, instead of them doing that, they'll put on that front and they'll be mad or angry or agitated. And they become agitated a lot easier when there's some anxiousness underlying that factor. Children may also report feelings of boredom. A lot of kids, man, feel like, oh man, I'm bored. I'm tired of being at home. I want to get out. I want to go see my friends. I want to go hang out. I want to go to the movies. But all these, they can't go to the movies. All these theaters and everything are closed down. And so children are feeling like, they're trapped in their home. And so I've talked to some young people before, and that's the thing that they say. They say, we feel like we're trapped, man. Even among your family, even with family members, brothers and sisters and siblings and aunts and uncles, man, yeah, I'm feeling trapped. And so if you can think about some things, you might want to just jot down some things that you might have noticed, or maybe some things that you've seen within your own children or within your own home when it comes to your children, maybe displaying or expressing some feelings of anxiousness or being anxious or having some signs of anxiety coming forth about the pandemic. One of the ways that we want to start, so this next part, we want to talk about how we can address your children's mental health, and what are some things that you can do. For some youth, the psychosocial impact of COVID-19 may relate to the onset of exacerbated or current mental health problems. In other words, if there were already some mental health issues or concerns already there, now that we're in this pandemic, it may have enhanced them or made them come out a little bit more. They may be more noticeable, more identifiable for you because of this. But that doesn't mean that they're just starting. It just means that they could have already been there, and because of this new anxiety or anxiousness that they're feeling about COVID-19, it may have speeded up the process a little bit. For other youth, particularly those with social anxiety disorders, remaining at home and doing online schooling may temporarily relieve their anxiety, and I've heard that too. Some youth say, hey, you know what? If we do return back to school, I'm going to stay right here and I'm going to continue to do online school. But this is not a long-term solution and may result in overwhelming anxiety when it is necessary to return back to school or have some type of social interaction with other youth or big crowds of people. And so we have to be careful with that. Certain factors reduce the risk of developing or worsening anxiety. Some of those factors include consistent home family routines, helping to develop high self-esteem, which leads to experiencing less stress, feelings of self-worth, providing some self-value for your kids, telling them how important they are, how smart they are, how good they're looking, and how well they're, keeping up on their, hygiene and taking care of themselves. And also, some other strategies might be, self-help strategies might be, if they got a gym or you got a home gym that, you guys can go and work out together or do some exercise together. Relaxation training can also be helpful when addressing your child's mental health needs. One of the big ways that I would like to, it doesn't cost anything except for you encouraging your kids to talk about what's frightening them and then validating their feelings. You can validating their feelings can help them to cope with anxiousness and fear. We all have things that scare us or that we're afraid of, and that's okay. Whenever you're feeling that emotion or that feeling you experience, don't be afraid to acknowledge that. If as an adult, don't be afraid to acknowledge that feeling and share your feelings with your kids. You know, they need to know that mom and dad might be a little bit afraid of something. You know, we all can't walk around and, oh man, I'm not scared of nothing, because then that teaches them, hey, when something's really bothering them, they can't say I'm afraid of it or I'm scared of it. So don't dismiss their feelings, and don't dismiss their fears. Don't dismiss your own either, because by showing and sharing that, you're actually modeling to them how they should handle it or how they can handle it, if they want, do what mom and dad did. So please do that. Also, please listen to your children non-judgmentally, and reflect back to them what you feel like you heard them say. And if you're not sure, ask a clarifying question. Ask them, could you repeat that? Or is this what you say? Is this what you are saying? Or is this what I just heard you say? Or were you saying something else? Just ask that clarifying question so that you can make sure that you're understanding your kids, and they can make sure that you are really tuning in and trying to understand them. That brings me to the end of this. Some of the references that I have on here. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I went over I skipped my physical, psychological, and behavioral signs of anxiety. Some of the physical signs, I'll try to go through this really quick. Some of the physical signs of anxiety might include rapid heartbeat, chest pain, rapid or shallow breathing, shortness of breath, headaches, dizziness, vomiting, diarrhea, muscle aches or pains. Those are all physical signs. Some of the psychological signs might be decreased concentration, indecisiveness, irritability, panic attacks, unrealistic or excessive fears, worry about the past or future events. These are all psychological. Behavioral signs might include avoidance of situations, obsessive or compulsive behavior, distress in social situations, a phobic behavior, usage of alcohol or drugs. And so these are all different signs that you might notice. And so if you get a chance, could you jot a couple of those down, maybe in the chat, some of those questions, and we'll see if we can address those or answer those. There's also some other resources on here, and please feel free to look at those at your earliest convenience. All right.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Hester. We greatly appreciate this presentation on anxiety, especially as we potentially prepare to bring children back to school in some fashion, whether it's hybrid or completely face-to-face. It's imperative that we as professionals are ready and prepared to provide the necessary resources to support our children and families. Thank you to all of our participants and stakeholders for joining us this evening for our session on peer university. And we will see you guys soon. Everyone have a good evening. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.